Hi, this is Marsha.
And this is Kelly.
We are the two Ewes of Two Ewes Fibra Adventures. Thanks for stopping by.
You'll hear about knitting, spinning, dyeing, crocheting, and just about anything else we can think of as a way to play with string.
We blog and post show notes at twoewesfiberadventures.com.
And we invite you to join our Two Ewes Fibra Adventures group on Ravelry. I'm 100 Projects.
And I am Better in Motion.
We're both on Instagram and Ravelry, and we look forward to meeting you there.
Enjoy the episode.
Good morning, Marsha.
How you doing?
Well, I feel pretty good after a 13-hour sleep.
We should let our listeners know what we're talking about.
Yes.
Do you want to tell people what was going on?
Sure. Marsha's mom passed away in January, as I think most people know, and we were at the memorial for her just this past week. She always had every year a party for bookstore retirees on the third Wednesday in July, and so Marsha decided that that would be the perfect time to do a memorial, and I agree. I think it was the perfect time. It was a great memorial garden party, Marsha.
It was really fun. I had it catered, and we had really good food, and my mother, as I did, worked at the university bookstore, the bookstore for the University of Washington. She started there in the 40s after she graduated from college, and that's where she met my father, is at the bookstore. So she has quite a love of the university bookstore, or had quite a love of the university bookstore. And so she always would have that party. So we invited all the people that would come to that party every summer. And then family that's here in Seattle. I have family down in the Aberdeen on my dad's side of the family. They came. And then just neighbors and other friends, and had a nice gathering to celebrate her life. And it was really fun to get.
Yeah, it was really fun.
And we have our good friend that played the bagpipes. And I got up and said a few words, and then I invited people to share memories. And so there were some nice things were said, and it was all in all a really nice party. And then, as always happens with my family, people start leaving. And then there's the core group that just keeps staying.
Right.
So we sent out for pizza. And it was very warm. This past week has been very, very warm. And so we sat out on the deck till 10:30, I think we were out there. And
yeah, it was
both nights.
I have the mosquito bites to prove it.
And so we sent out for pizza, and then we pulled out some of the food, leftover food from the party for my mom, and had that, and had ice cream, and it was just a really nice time. And I really appreciate you and Robert coming up, and you guys were great because you washed dishes, and Robert said, I'll go sweep the deck and the patio, and he wiped down the chairs and got everything really, he helped me get the cooler full of the wine and beer. He got that ready, and it was fun.
Yeah, Robert's good at party preparations. Yeah. He knows how to make a place ship shape.
And the thing about the washing of the dishes, the washing of dishes that we had to do were our own dishes from dinner. The caterer provided the wine glasses and napkins and plates. So what was really nice is you just kind of shake off any extra food and just put them all back in a plastic bin, and put the wine glasses back in this in their little basket thing that they had, and they just came and picked it up that evening. And so that was like the best part of having a caterer, is they do the dishes.
Yeah, that was nice.
Yeah, so
that was nice.
Yeah, it was a really fun event, and now it feels sort of like that was the last thing I wanted to do for my mom, and now that's done. It was a very nice event. So, but I have to say I am exhausted. There was so much getting ready for it, and I should say too that the party, not only is it in the garden and back, but also the garage. There's a big 3-car garage in the backyard, and my parents always had parties. The garden party always sort of took over the garage. So we had a lot of preparation just to get the garage ready, because as we've been clearing the house out. We've been just stacking things in the garage, and the Friday before the party, I finally just rented a van and took everything, the big items, to the Goodwill. And then I ran out of time, so then my brother and I on Saturday, I think we made 3 more trips to the Goodwill of the little things. So it was...
Yeah, I can't imagine having a party in our garage or what it would take to get... And we don't even have a 3-car garage. Ours is a relatively small, old garage.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, having said that, though, I mean, it's not empty. My brother's old 68 Ford is still in there. The gas stove from the 20s that my father got for me is still in there, which we're trying to sell all of that, and get rid of it. Get it out. It's time for all of that to go. The I don't know, like 5 bathrooms worth of tile that my brother got someplace is sitting out there. There's
2 purple sinks.
2 purple sinks are still sitting out there. A piano. And what else is... Oh, I know, Ben's motorcycles. He's been...
Oh, right.
As he's running out of space in our 1-car garage that he's taken over, there's 4 bicycles, too. 4 or 5 bicycles, I think.
Luckily, it was big enough that you could clear out the center, and that was just kind of on one edge.
Yeah,
It gave some people something interesting to look at.
Yes, and all of the... I always have to laugh because the men, especially, always have to have a conversation about the car. And then there was conversations about the stove this time because we have it out because we'd taken pictures of it to post online to sell it. So it gives the men something to talk about, the car. Anyway, really fun event. But as I say, I am exhausted. And I didn't do anything yesterday. I just am recovering. So, but we're recording, and I did knit. And so we should probably maybe we can give our project updates because Kelly, you have a lot to report.
Sure. Yes. Okay. And where did my book go? Oh, here it is. So I have 3 finished projects. 2 of them I finished since the last episode. And this episode is a week late. So I guess I would have already reported on them if we had recorded on the regular schedule. But so the first thing, 2 that I just finished and 1 that I finished a while back and I forgot to mention. So I'll talk about that first.
Okay.
The sheep thrills. Remember our sheep thrills, knit along, crochet along, that neither one of us finished a project for?
Right.
I finished my pillow, the bauble. It's the bauble sheep pillow. It's a Pearl Soho pattern, and I used my hand-spun bulky yarn that I had spun on the Salish spinner.
Right.
It was the leftover gray from the Orca, and I don't know if it's bulky weight or super bulky. I don't remember. I don't think I ever did the wraps per inch to find out, but I knit it with a size 11 or 15. That's a big gap. I think it was an 11. And I'm not sure I want to make another one. It turned out really cute. And I used some black Wensleydale for the ears, and because Wensleydale is a long wool that it really retains its curl, so even when you make the yarn out of it, it still has, I don't know, it wants to go back to the shape of the lock.
Okay.
So it's it's a nice silky yarn, but it has a mind of its own. Anybody who has hair that when you try to curl it, it won't, or if you try to make it straight, it won't. That's kind of the way the Wensleydale seems to me.
Yeah.
So anyway, it makes the ears cock at a really nice, cute angle. So it turned out darling. Black face and black ears, and then this gray sheep with all the baubles. But, oh my God, those baubles. Like every five stitches or something like that, you did a bauble. And
somebody else was talking about making that sheep and that the baubles were intense. It was a struggle, kind of.
Yeah. And I think because of the size of the needle, I didn't have a lot of selection. My needle collection is pretty extensive. I don't have any needle kits like a kit with the different cables and the different tips. But I have a lot of needles that I've inherited over the years, or so I have a lot of choice in almost every size. But for this particular size, what I had on hand was Addy Turbos, which I normally really like, but they're very blunt.
Mm-hmm.
And doing baubles with a bulky textured yarn and a blunt needle is not a good combination. So if I were to do this pillow again, I think I might actually make the investment and buy needles that were a little bit pointier to do it. But it's very cute, and I have more bulky yarn. I could make a CVM sheep. I could use all the colors of my orca sweater.
You could make
a gray sheep, a white sheep, and a brown tan sheep.
You can make a herd.
Yeah.
Or a flock. No, what are they? Is it
flock.
A flock of sheep? Yeah, you can make a flock.
Yeah. So
it'd be fun.
But I don't know. It sounds fun. But then I think about what it was like to knit this pillow, and I think, And I didn't make legs on it by the time I got done. I thought, you know what, the legs are just going to lay flat. You don't stuff them. I did stuff the head. It doesn't call for stuffing the head. And there, I looked on the Pearl Soho website, and there are people who ask the question, isn't the head going to be too floppy if you don't stuff it? So I stuffed the head a little bit. I didn't leave it just as the unstuffed flat.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I left the legs off. By the time I got that thing Kitchener together, I was done.
Yeah.
I did not want to add legs to the bottom of it. So, and it's very cute. It sits on the chair in the living room at the moment. So, finished, I don't know, maybe a month and a half ago, something like that. When summer first started, it was one of the first things I finished after summer started. I finished the second pair of fingering weight Argyle socks. So these are out of the Ruama, I believe is how you say the yarn name.
Oh, right, yeah.
And it's the Ruama Tumi. And the Tumi yarn is 50% wool and 50% alpaca. So it's a little softer. I did discover that I don't know if I mentioned this on the podcast before, but I did discover that it's actually sock weight. All that yarn, or not sock weight. It's also actually sport weight. All that yarn we bought at the wall of yarn.
Right.
I think is the name of the shop they were sharing with the yarn guys.
Yeah.
Anyway, all that yarn that I bought is all sport.
Oh, okay.
Not sock.
Oh.
But it didn't matter. I used the same size needles that I had used for Robert's, and I got a little bit longer row gauge, but the stitch gauge was right on. And, I had Robert try them on because I kept thinking, okay, wait, these are looking too small. And it's funny because Robert kept saying, you said that about mine too, and they were just fine. Because I kept thinking, these are too small, these are too small. But I also was telling myself, that can't be. You can't be knitting socks on the same size needles with larger yarn and get smaller socks.
Right.
It's just, that's not possible. So I kept telling myself that, and then Robert was helping me too. But I finished them. They're stiffer than Robert's because they're sport yarn at a fingering weight gauge. But they're really nice. I like how they turned out. The colors, there's a kind of a lagoon dark blue color is the main color of the socks. And I also use that for the heel and the cuff. And then the diamonds are a rust color and a sort of a sea glass blue-green, pale blue-green color. Pretty. And then you should think so because you picked it out.
Oh.
Or you helped me anyway.
Yeah.
Remember we were standing there?
I know, it was super fun. I remember.
You kept swapping out colors. And then kind of a green, like an acidy green, not super bright, but more of they call it lime, but it's more of a goldy green color. That is the little crisscrosses.
Yeah.
And then I did end up doing the toe in the contrasting rust. The heels and cuffs are both in the main color of the sock, but the toe is in the contrasting rust color because I actually was running out of the main color blue for this pair. I think it says I used 250 in my Ravelry page. I weighed everything so I could tell how much was being used. So it says I used 1.96 skeins, 254 meters. They're all 50 gram skeins. So I used the equivalent basically of 250-gram skeins, but I would have thought I had used a little bit more than that because they're men's socks.
Yeah.
So they're bigger, but no, if I weighed everything properly, then I was kind of barely, not quite used up all of 50 gram, the equivalent of 250 gram skeins. So those are done, and I'm very happy, and they're for Dennis, and we're going camping this coming weekend, and his birthday's not till August. I was going to give him to him for his birthday, but I don't want to wait that long.
Yeah.
So I think I'm just going to bring him to the camping trip and give them to him now.
Yeah.
It was cute because when we were at Stitches, I had just taken the Argyle sock class.
Right.
I was in the middle of it, and during the lunch break, we met my mom and Dennis for lunch.
Right.
And so we were sitting at the table in the bar restaurant area, and I was showing off my project, and he's like, "Ooh, do I get some next? I need some for golf." so he was my second pair of these Argyle socks. So I've been having fun with that. So those are done. And then the third thing that I'm finished with is also another project that I was knitting on while we were at the Black Sheep Gathering. That's how I got most of these two projects done. And that's the bee pillow. And I'm happy to say that the bee pillow is not only knitted, washed, steeked, washed and blocked again, but also sewn into an actual pillow.
And where is it sitting right now?
Right now, it's sitting in the living room on the chair with the lock rug throw. You know, that rug that I made out of all the locks from a fleece. It's sitting on that chair. That's where it's sitting right now.
All right. That's so exciting that it's done. And it's gorgeous.
So cool.
Beautiful.
Yeah. It came out so pretty. I highly recommend that pattern. It's called Clover, Bee, and Reverie by Mona Zilla. And it's gorgeous. Her pattern is gorgeous.
Well, and the yarn is beautiful too because you use the neighborhood fiber company, and the colors are pretty. Wrong.
Yeah. Druid Hill is the brown, and then Oliver is the gold, and both of them are perfect bee colors. I mean, the Druid Hill color seems to me like exactly the color of an old dark comb from the hive. And then the gold, it's a little greener, a little more green tones than beeswax once it's rendered, but it's pretty close to the color of rendered beeswax. And you just melt it down and in a block that I have in the garage. Yeah. So yeah, it's so pretty. Yeah. I'm really happy with it, and it was fun. It was really a fun pattern. So I am going to do, that was kind of my test knit for deciding if I wanted to do the blanket. And I am definitely doing the blanket. And the blanket is called Such Is the Quality of Bees, also by Mona Zilla. And it has the same motif in the center of it, but then it has other motifs around the edge, and then it has a cable border, and then something else around. It has like a cable that goes all the way around, and then something else, like a mitered edge border. So... Well, I'm not starting that anytime soon.
Well, and you're talking about that someone had made a version that's double knit, so it's reversed on the other side, and you're talking about doing that, correct? Yeah,
that center part, which is the bulk of the blanket. In the original pattern, you just see the back of the stranded knitting, which it actually looks pretty good for the back of color work because you trap it every other stitch. Yeah. But when I saw the double knit one, I thought, okay, I have to do that.
Yeah. Well, and I would say I saw now your pillow, no one's going to see the back, right? Because it's inside the pillow, but it looked pretty, I thought.
Yeah, it was interesting how that looked. Yeah. I think so. And the back, and then so the front of the pillow is the knitting, and then the back of the actual pillow is fabric that I bought, and it was the perfect gold color, I think. And then I was going to make buttonholes, but my sewing machine is old and needs to be cleaned and maybe repaired, definitely oiled. definitely cleaned, and I couldn't get it to make buttonholes properly. It kept building up too much.
Oh, yeah.
You know how the tension is off and you just get too many threads, and then the feed dogs can't move the fabric. And so I used up an entire swatch of fabric trying to get buttonholes that looked good. And finally I decided, you know what? I don't really need buttonholes. And so I just made the back of the pillow into two flaps that overlapped. And I sewed the buttons on the top flap, but they're not attached to the bottom flap at all. Oh. And there's no button, so it's no big deal.
Yeah.
First I was going to sew them onto both flaps, and Robert's like, "Oh, that's terrible, because when you have to wash the pillow, you're going to have to unsew the buttons and sew the buttons back on." And I thought, well, that's not so bad. And then I thought, well, wait a minute, why do I even have to sew it to the...
Well, and if it opens...
Two layers.
If it opens up, you could just put snaps there.
Yeah, and it doesn't.
Or Velcro or something.
Yeah, but it doesn't open up. And then I had feather pillows that were on the couch in the sunroom that I'd bought, like Pier 1 imports or something, that were this really pretty kind of raw silk. And the sun had just destroyed the fabric, but I saved the forms. And they didn't work. They weren't the right size, but I cut one of the pillow forms open and then carefully, well, I tried to be as neat as possible, carefully transferred feathers from that pillow form into a different pillow form that I made to go inside. So anyway, I'm done.
I was going to say, Kelly's Spirit Pillows. Recycle. They ended their life on the and began a new life in another form.
Yes, and so if I decide to do another pillow of some sort, I do have another one of those pillow forms. But yeah, it was kind of funny. It's like, okay, well, I'm going to and I was like, what are you doing? I'm reusing these pillows, the feathers from inside these pillows.
That's a good idea.
Anyway, so those are my 3 projects that are done. As for what I'm working on now, well, I have in my hand right now, I have you saw it, but it's a sock head cowl, and it's out of spirit yarn. Speaking of spirit yarn, from the D-stash at Knockers. It's really pretty. It's kind of a red, purple, and brown, and a little bit of flecks of orange.
Well, we should say who it's from.
Oh, yeah, it's from Janice.
It's from Janice.
Wild Pony.
Wild Pony to Janice. And actually, it wasn't last year. It was the year before at the Knockers retreat. We were sitting and she just pulled it out of her bag and she handed it to me. And she said, "This is for you. It's spirit yarn. This is just for you." So she said, "I don't like the color." So she gave it to me. And I
stole it.
Yeah, and then I had my stash. And I think in January when you came up and we had the meetup, and we were going through my stash, and I said, "This was from Janice," and you said, "Well, you were going to take it." And I said, "That's fine, take it, because it needs." And so you're making that, and it's beautiful.
It's turning out really good. It's merino silk, so it's nice and drapey, and it was the perfect thing to have with me for the 3 days that we were gone. For the plane and the car and back and forth sitting, and so I'm almost done. I'm about to start the ribbing on that. So that's what I'm knitting on right now. The only other works in progress that I have is the blankets, the woven blankets, which I haven't touched. The 2 at a time socks, which I did touch long enough to take them apart, so they are no longer 2 at a time. And I don't think I will ever do 2 at a time socks on 2 circular needles again. I was going to just make myself finish them, and I thought, this is dumb. Just put them on, do them in parallel. You have enough sock needles, double points. So yeah, that's where they are. But that's all I did, is I took them apart. Took them into two separate sets of needles. And then I did pick back up my wrap, the Coloresque wrap that is the Neighborhood Fiber Company gradient. But I'm at the point now where I need to change to the next part of the pattern in another yarn, and I don't know where I put the rest of that gradient. I have the one wound ball in the project bag, the pattern is not there, and I know I printed out the pattern. The pattern isn't there, and the rest of the yarn isn't there. And I looked for it because I wanted to bring it on the trip.
It might be in a project bag or something, a different project bag or something.
I've looked.
Oh.
I'm sure it's
there.
I'm sure it's somewhere. It's not like it disappeared.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's not like lost and I'll never find it. But it's like, okay, what in the heck did I do with that? I think I've accounted for all my project bags. I don't have that many of them. I've looked in all the usual places.
Well, because I know you were working on it at Knockers. Weren't you working on it at Knockers?
No, at Stitches.
Oh, at Stitches. Yes, that's right. You were working on it. And it was
yeah. And then I moved just the one ball and the project into a bag and brought that bag to work as work knitting. And that's where I finally, at first I couldn't find any of it. And then I remembered that there was a project bag in my office at work. And so I went and got it, and that was the project, but it's only one ball of yarn. So I don't know where the rest of it is. I'll have to find it. I did work on it, and I got to the point where I need to switch yarns, and now I have to find the other yarn. So
it's there.
Yeah, it's somewhere.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of having the time to search. So.
Well, you've been busy.
That's my project. Yeah. Because I'm trying to get yardage for this, stash.
I know.
I think I've got about 6,000 yards. So I've knit or spun a 6K.
Okay.
Yeah, that's pretty impressive.
Yeah, it is. I'm impressed.
It's more impressive than any exercise I've done. I haven't done a 6K. But we're not going to talk about that. We're going to go on to our next topic.
Yes. Anyway, well, so are you finished with your projects, guys?
Yeah.
So my project, I don't have a whole lot to report. I've not completed anything, but I'm continuing to work on the Summer Fjord, the same t-shirt that you did by Trin Anelli. And I did have a mistake when I think I know when this happened is on the train down to Albany, Oregon for the Black Sheep Gathering. I remember this yarn is very slippery and it slid off. It's constantly sliding off the needles. And in this pattern, there's a fake side seam. That's just a purl stitch that goes the entire length. And that's where your stitch marker is. And I don't know how I did it, but when it fell out, the stitch marker fell out and I put it back in. I put it back one stitch over in the wrong place. So my side seam then made a jog. And then I was doing increases, so my jog increased.
Got bigger.
It
was a bigger. An earthquake happened.
And so I did a lot of knitting on that t-shirt during Black Sheep. I mean, well, how many 5 hours on the train down and 5 hours back or more? Well, then the train was delayed, so I had an extra 4 hours because of the train being delayed. But anyway, I had about 6 or 7 inches that I had to rip back to get to that jog to fix it. And I did think for a long time about just leaving it. And then I texted you a picture, and you texted back, you have to fix it. Which is, I just needed someone to tell me. I knew I needed to fix it, but I needed, sometimes you need someone to say, no, you need to fix it. So
having that actual pattern, having knit that pattern and having that sweater, it's very noticeable. That side seam is very noticeable. And when it got washed, it got even more.
Yeah.
It's very clear delineation.
It's a design feature that needs to be correct.
Yeah. If you're going to do it, it has to be right.
Yeah.
And I think if I make that again, I won't put that in. I don't think it's necessary. I don't think it really does anything.
Yeah.
For the pattern, I don't know.
Well, and there's a lot going on texturally with the pattern, with all the different bands of different textures. So it isn't. Right. It's not like it's mostly stockinette.
The only detail. Yeah.
But anyway,
like on the ED, it's one of the few details.
Yeah.
I went, but having started with it, you have to finish with it, and it has to be straight.
Yes. So anyway, I did your technique. I laid the sweater out on one of the those blocking squares, and I just put it inside the sweater. So I just had the side on the top, and then pinned it, and I put a double pointed needle a couple rows below the mistake, and then just 5, maybe I think it was about 5 or 6 stitches. that I just ripped back those, I think it was 6. I ripped back to that double-pointed needle that was holding and so I wouldn't go past that. And then as I ripped out each row, I took a pin, and like the first one, I'd pull it to the left, kind of pin it. Second row, pull it to the right, pin it. Then go back to the left, back to the right. And I can put pictures in the show notes. They're on my project page. And then when I get back down to the mistake, I put the 2 double-pointed needles I picked up, and I just started reknitting those lines of yarn. It's like you now have like a big, huge ladder, so to speak, or fan. It looks like a fan, kind of, all these pieces of yarn. And then I just reknit each row all the way up until I get back to the very top, and I put it back onto the needles, and I just knit another row to get back on track, and it worked. Now, the linen yarn that I'm using, it's Fibra Natura. It's 100% linen, and it's very stiff yarn, and I find that it's not hard on my hands. A lot of times knitters and crocheters say that knitting with or crocheting with linen or cotton or hemp is hard on their hands. I don't find that. I do find, though, because it doesn't have any stretch, or bounciness, a buoyancy, or whatever you want to call it, that it's hard to purl with. Also, it's a 4-ply, and it's it's loosely plied, and so it splits a lot. And so I've had to do a lot of just correcting of when I see that I've knit a stitch and it's only 2 of the plies are caught up in the stitch, and I have to go back and fix that. So it was harder this technique of fixing it was harder than if it was with wool. Because the yarn is so
kind of wiry,
and there's no give. And when I finished it looks terrible. It looks like I didn't correct it at all, and that's because the stitches are all a bit misshapen. And so what I've been doing is I've been sort of pulling on it to get them back into order. And I think what I also need to do is just take a small crochet hook and sort of even out the stitches, because some are too loose and some are too tight. So just sort of redistribute the yarn over and then I think with washing, a good trip through the spa, it'll all even out even more. I
think you're right.
I'll try and post pictures in my project page after I sort of redistribute the stitches, and then of course before and after washing. So
next time we'll talk. Next time, try to remember, and we'll mention how it turned out, and then we can put a before. In next episode, we can put a before and after picture.
Yeah. So I've made good progress too, and I'm actually, as we're recording, I'm binding off.
Oh, nice.
So
it looks really pretty. I mean, it's not as pretty as it's going to be once it's washed, but I really like it.
Yeah. And I love the color really too. It's kind of a bright apple green kind of. I love the color. So I'm making pretty good progress. And so then after I bind off, I just have to pick up and do the neckline. And then my understanding is the sleeves, you just pick up around the armholes and do about 1 inch of ribbing and then bind off. Now yours, you actually made them longer, right? They go down to your elbow, don't they? They're elbow length. And I haven't.
I did about 1.5 inches of stockinette and then the ribbing, and that put them, because they're drop shoulders, that put them about top of elbow.
Yeah, and I'm going to try this on and see. I don't want a sleeveless top, obviously, and this is not going to be a sleeveless, but I don't know how long I want them. So I'll just decide. I'll try it on and then decide. And I might even wash it first before I do the sleeves, because it will benefit from multiple washings. That won't hurt it. So, so anyway, that's where I am on that project.
Cool.
So that's really the only thing I've been working on. Oh, the other thing I've been working on for the Tour de Fleece is my 3rd combo spin, and I completed another 3 skeins of yarn. And
they're beautiful.
I think they're really pretty too, and I have to toot my own horn and say they're beautiful. I'm really happy with them. I have about 1,300 yards. I have about 6 ounces of fiber left. So when you fill up the 3 bobbins, and then of course as you ply them, one of those bobbins you run out, right? So then you have to stop and spin more yarn. So what I did is all those 3 bobbins, I weighed the empty one, and then weighed the ones that still had the singles on them, and then I've divided up the fiber I have into bags. So I'm making this sound more complicated, but I basically figured out how much more fiber I needed to spin on each bobbin to make them come out relatively equal. So that's my next project is, and once I finish
So that'll be your last skein.
That'll be my last skein.
Well, it'll be maybe more than one skein because I can't get 3 bobbins worth of singles plied onto one skein.
No, I can't either. And
onto one bobbin.
My 3 full bobbins made 3 skeins.
Yeah.
This is 6 ounces, so I think it will probably be like a full skein and a half skein, or a little skein, I think.
Yeah.
I'm not quite sure. Each of my skeins,
You're about 2 ounces, right?
Each of my finished skeins, let me just say the first 2 that were full were about 4 ounces, approximately. Roughly 4 ounces.
Okay.
And then the last one where you just, you run out of yarn on that first bobbin, you run out, those were all around 2 ounces approximately on average. Okay. So I think with the, just doing the math, I think I'll probably end up with another like 380 yards, say 350 yards. So I'll have probably about 1,700 yards. And I think it's DK weight. I'm not really sure.
That would be my guess, just looking at it. But have they been washed?
No, they have not.
Yeah, so maybe
they'll plump up.
Yeah, they might.
Yeah. And I also, here's something, Kelly. I'm going to end up with probably 7 to 8 skeins. I have 6 right now. So say I end up with 8 skeins. I haven't washed any of them. What's your technique for, I now have, I've weighed, I've counted, I know what the yardage is and what the weight of each skein is, and I put a tag on it. So now when I wash them, how do you keep track of which skein is which?
Oh, I don't.
You don't?
But what you can do is if you have one of those Tyvek mailer bags, those mailing bags that look like kind of like that, like Tyvek suit material?
Uh-huh.
Do you know what I'm talking about? You sound like you don't know.
I don't think I know what you're talking about. A mailing bag?
So like when you get something in the mail, it can come in an envelope. Mm-hmm. But not a paper envelope. Like those white envelopes.
Oh, yes. They're kind of like a fibery material.
Like they look sort of like fabric, but
I know what you're talking about.
They're like a cross between fabric and paper. Cut that up, and you can make tags that you can then put onto your skeins, and you can write on it with a Sharpie, and it can get wet, and it doesn't. It'll stay.
Okay, all right. I'll try that then.
What some people do is you can actually buy those armbands that they make for like parties, or not parties. Well, we wore one for Robert's reunion party. so they could tell who had crashed. They could tell if somebody was crashing the reunion or not. But those armbands that you get like at amusement parks, or if you do like a wine tour.
Oh, right. Or if you go
like a beer festival,
or you go to Mexico and you check into the resort and they stick one on your arms.
Yes. So they know that you're not crashing. Yes. You can actually buy those.
Oh, okay.
And then you can use those as tags, because the advantage of them is that you can write on them with a Sharpie and it doesn't wash off.
Oh, okay. That's a good idea.
And the fabric or material that they're made of is able to go through the wash.
Okay. Because I had also thought of just taking different colored scrap yarn and putting on there, but then I got, and then
you'd have to make yourself a legend.
You'd have to make myself a legend. And then I was also worried maybe like dye might come off on them or something, but I don't know. That might be less of a problem.
Yeah, I mean, especially if you have something that is a lighter color, something a color that's not gonna matter. I don't think it would make that much difference.
Yeah. The other thing I could do is just not worry about it, and
because
just not worry about it. But you know how I am. This is how I am, Kelly. Like some things I'm so slapdash, and other things I'm like, ooh, let's figure this all out. The other thing is I know the weight of all of them, so I could just wash them and then just reweigh them, and I would know if something's 2 ounces,
they're all different.
Yeah, I know.
I guess knowing the yardage is, you've already done the work of counting the yardage. But like, why do you need to know how many yards are in a skein once you start knitting with it?
I don't.
If you know you have enough yards all together, what does it matter?
There's no reason why other than I just want to.
Okay. Well, now you know what you can do.
I know.
If you don't have one of those mailing bags from some package that you've ordered, you can go down to the post office and see if you can buy one.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, no, there's really no reason why I need to. So that's it for me with projects. And then I think the other thing, too, is I, too, am soon going to be sort of, well, that's not really true to say that I have a clean slate because I have 2 shawls that I have not been working on. So I'll probably start working on those after I finish this, the T-shirt and the spinning. And then I have some sweater quantities that I wanted to start probably knitting with. There's the teal colored yarn that we had dyed when I was down there in April. So I have that out, and you saw I have a pattern. I think I'm going to start that pretty soon. So I don't know. I too am going to start thinking about the next project, but that can
wait. I've been kind of debating about, well, I was telling you earlier that I've been kind of debating about, do I just finish what I have so I have a clean slate, because I kind of want to feel what that feels like. But then I've needed to start new things, so I've started only just little short things like this cowl. But I do have a couple of things that I put in my queue for the loop bump that I have, which is a gradient. I found a shawl called Sundowner that I think would be pretty for the loop bump. And then I also found a crochet shawl that is called the Dewdrops shawl. And it's by Silk Terhorst, Silke Terhorst, Terhorst. And it's really pretty, and I think it would make a really nice project for a sort of slow color changing yarn. And I have 2 of those in my stash. That's what I've been looking at, is what I can do with some of that slow color change yarn that I have.
Okay.
So, but yeah, I think I'm going to focus on getting my works in progress down to 0.
All right.
I don't know. That sounds a little scary.
Scary's good.
I just want to feel what it feels like to have a clean slate.
Okay.
So, Marsha, that's all your projects. But you did have something else you wanted to talk about, a little bit of math for knitters?
Yes, well, we had put it out on the discussion thread if anyone had questions to ask a question. And we talked about this briefly the last time we recorded, that we need to do a little bit more research. But Pine Lake Chic, and her name is Ann G., had asked the question about using different gauge and yarn with shaped garments. So she said she understood how different the gauge is going to affect the size of the garment, but she said she could do things if they're just a square or a rectangle, but if it's shaped, how do you do that? I am no expert at this. I'm actually learning myself, so I was interested in the question. And we did have a response from one of our listeners, Yorkset. Her name is Laritza from Maryland. And she suggested Ann Budd's book called Knitter's Handy Book of Top-Down Sweaters, Basic Designs in Multiple Sizes. And that if you, she was saying that if you work through that book, you have a really good understanding about how to use different yarns and how that affects gauge and how to it affects the garment and changes you can make. I started looking for books online, and I didn't find very much that specifically was that was the topic. There's a lot of books about fit, which I'm sure would have information about the topic, but I didn't write any of those titles down because I wasn't 100% sure, and I don't own them to actually look at them. But I did, just a side note, I just put in knitting and math as the subject line in Amazon, and this came up. It was a pair of slippers for children that said, "Dear Math, I am not a therapist. Solve your own problems."
Okay, that's funny.
Now that's totally off topic, but I thought it was funny.
Well, and since you brought that up, I'm gonna tell you another one that I sometimes put on the board at school. It's a picture. It's a photograph, chalk on a chalkboard, and I put it up on the screen, and it says, "Dear algebra, stop asking us to find your ex. She's gone, and we don't know why." The letter Y.
That's cute. That's funny. Very cute. Anyway, well, we digress, though.
Yes.
Anyway, so I'm not going to. I don't really have any books to recommend because I couldn't actually look at them, but I did go and I got thinking about the Craftsy classes, and I did take a Craftsy class, and the one I took is the one that Amy Herzog teaches on sweater modifications for a custom fit, and I've talked about this before. That that what I learned was. I'm getting a little bit off the topic of the math part of it. One of the things I learned was if you picked a sweater that you wanted to have more ease through the bust line, the mistake I made is I just put additional stitches under the arm, the armhole at the and with the problem with that though is that then it makes your sleeve really large, and it's too much fabric then at the armhole.
Yeah.
And what I learned from her class is that all the additional stitches should go on the front, like not exactly on the side seam and not on the front of the sweater, but maybe 10 stitches in towards the front of the sweater from the side seam. And that the increases for the bust line should go on the front because that's where the lumps are, so to speak, and not on your back. Which is, and when I read that, or when she said that in the class, it was really funny, But in that class, she talked a lot about gauge and not only the gauge, so the width of the swatch, but also the height. So the row gauge, how many rows you're getting per inch, and then of course how many stitches you're getting per inch, and how that affects the sweater, and then what size sweater to pick. And and we talked about this before, but it's not the size you want to pick is not the size that matches your bust line. You want to actually, the size you think you want the finished pattern to be on your bust line is actually the measurement around your back and over the top of your bust line. So like under the arms and across the top, not the actual fullest part of the bust line. And then you pick the pattern that's as closest to that measurement. So then you'll get a good fit through the shoulders, and then you can do the adjustment increases for the bust line or decreases, whatever you choose to do. So that was, I think it was a really good course, and she does talk a lot about how picking different gauges and the needle size, how it affects the fabric. So maybe you want to have a more open drapey fabric for the sweater, and then that's how that's going to affect the sweater and how you need to adjust the sweater. So there's a lot of discussion about that. So I just went through Craftsy, and people probably know this because everyone can look at Craftsy, but there were some other classes that I thought would really help answer this question. And there's one that Kelly Nuss teaches called Yarn Substitution Made Easy. And
that would be interesting.
And then Sally Melville, and I know I've never taken one of her classes, but I hear her name all the time as people discussing her classes. So she teaches a class called Wear What You Knit, Perfect Sweater Fit and Style. And both of the classes, the one that Kelly Nuss teaches and the one that Sally Melville teaches, are normally $40, but they're on sale right now for $14.99. So I'm thinking of maybe taking those. And what's nice about the Craftsy class is that you can actually see each chapter of the class, what they're going to teach. And I was reading all of these, and they do talk about yarn substitution and the math and charts that you can fill in to figure out if you're making changes, how it's going to affect the pattern and what you need to do.
Nice.
And as I can't talk too much in detail about it because I've not taken the classes, but I am thinking about taking them. And then the one that I also thought would be really good for this question is one called Sizing Knitwear Patterns. And it's by Fauna Goberstein. She is a knitwear designer, and Kelly, a math professor. So I thought this probably be a really good class to answer this question about the math and gauge and changing yarns. And it says in each chapter, she goes into detail and also gives you information on spreadsheets to put the information into a spreadsheet so that if you're changing this, how it would affect that. And I'm not explaining it very well, but if you go in and look at the chapter titles, I think it would be a good class to take.
Well, and the spreadsheet would be kind of nice because once you made the spreadsheet once, you could use it for multiple different projects where you had to change things.
Yeah. So I will report back. I think I'm going to take her class because it's also on sale. It's normally $40. It's on sale for $24.99.
Oh, cool.
But I think I am really interested in this topic because I have learned, as you said, with the School of Hard Knocks, the modification I made
increases under the armpit.
Yes, that was not a good idea, and I've done other things that just didn't work.
I did the same thing with the raglan, wanting to make the sleeve cap wider, where I started increasing faster. Instead of just starting with the sleeve cap wider, and that made a lot of bulk too. It ended up with a lot of bulky fabric around the arm.
Yeah, and the sweater that I just finished, the Little Wave, I think now that it's done, I think there's things that I would have done differently. And I think when you were when I brought the sweater down to Black Sheep Gathering, and you said that it's a okay, I'm drawing a blank on what is that sweater, that sleeve?
A set-in sleeve?
It's not a set-in sleeve, and it's not saddle shoulder.
Oh, right.
And it's kind of, there's a lot of fabric around the armhole, and you have to kind of fiddle with it to get it to fit, to look nice. And your comment was you feel like there's too many stitches in the saddle shoulder. That it's like that whole thing needs to be a little bit, the saddle part needs to be a little bit smaller, that it would sort of pull the whole thing up and it would fit better. And I think that's a good point. And this is the kind of thing I think that taking these classes, I might learn that, well, if it's a worsted weight yarn, I think it was 11 stitches there. Maybe it shouldn't be 11. Maybe it should be 7 or something. You know? I mean, you would learn more about this. And then, of course, I did, as I mentioned before, I took the Amy Herzog class on sweater modifications for a custom fit. She has 2 other classes. One is called Simple Techniques for Super Fit, and reading the contents, I think that would be a good class also. It'd cover this topic. And then the other one that she offers is the Knit to Flatter, and I do have the book.
Took that one, yeah.
And I think she spends a lot of time in that class talking about focusing more on which sweater styles are good for different body types.
Right, yeah.
But within that, she does talk about making modifications to sweaters and about gauge and the math involved. So that might be a later one to take. But I think these other ones would probably be really good. And as I say, I think I am going to take the yarn substitution made easy sounds really good, and then that sizing knitwear patterns, the one with the
math professor. That sounds interesting.
Yeah, I think I'm going to take both of those, and I can report in.
Cool.
So that's it. I just wanted to answer that question, and as best I can, and I'll keep talking about it as I learn more.
Okay. And there was also the question about alpaca, and I haven't done any further research about that, but Yorkset also made a comment in the Ravelry thread, so she's answered the question a little bit, and I'm thinking maybe Tracy Thumperina could weigh in because she's worked with a lot of alpaca, so I might talk with her a little bit, or maybe she'll pop into the discussion boards and say something about working with alpaca, because she's worked with a lot of alpaca fleeces.
Okay, and then you had another thing you wanted to talk about too.
Yeah, so when we were coming back home from Black Sheep Gathering, we were at the border, the California-Oregon border, and we noticed just off to the left, off to the east of I-5 at the border, they have a border checkpoint between Oregon and California where you can't bring plant material across the border, so they ask you, and they take, like if you have peaches or something, they take them from you. So we were right there, and we saw that there was a fire starting just off to the east of this checkpoint, And it turned out that was a huge fire. It turned into a huge fire that actually closed I-5 that evening and part of the next day. And, lots of evacuations. And I don't remember how many tens of thousands of acres were finally burned. It's now 100% contained. At the same time, there was another fire going on called the County Fire in Lake County, and that one is now 100% contained. That one might be all the way out. And then I wasn't meaning to talk about this today, but just this morning, I found out that there's a fire in the Redding area near Whiskeytown Lake, where we used to go on vacation as a kid. And Whiskeytown Lake is completely burned, and they were evacuating parts of Redding. And that fire just really took off overnight last night, and it's not hardly at all contained. I can't remember what that one's being called. But anyway, lots of fires in California this summer. And then, there's the fire in Greece. And of course, we're all sensitive to what everybody's going through who's involved in the fire, has fire damage. But what I had not ever really thought about before, and now, following several shepherds on Instagram, is the extra expense that's involved, even if all that happens is you're evacuated or you're protecting your property from the fire. So there is a woman, her name is Sally Fox, who I follow on Instagram, and she's actually the founder of Fox Fiber, and I've known her story since the late 90s when I first started spinning. She was experimenting with growing colored cotton in the Central Valley, and the Central Valley cotton farmers were not happy with her at all because they were afraid of cross-pollination of her colored cotton with their white. Of course, they want pure white cotton.
Pure white, yeah.
And she ended up moving to Texas and growing cotton there for a while. Anyway, she's back in California. Her company name is Vreseis, Vreseis Limited. And her farm is Viriditas Farm. So her story on Instagram was about the fire started just behind her property, and she did have to be evacuated. I don't think she had any loss to her farm, but she had to run her irrigation so that her sheep could be protected from the fire. So she had an irrigated island that the sheep were on of green grass. And so that was an expense. And then there were expenses of moving things, and she had to pack up all of her, her seeds, her heirloom cotton seeds, and to protect all the work that she's done over the, past probably 30 years. And then, then there's an impact of putting her sheep on pasture before she was actually planning to do that, and some danger that the sheep would get sick from moving so quickly from one type of food to another. And then, her expenses of moving things and the equipment, getting the equipment moved and set up to do the irrigating. Anyway, so she has I never really thought about all of the additional expenses that you would have.
Right.
Even if your property was spared. So she has a thing on her shop to donate to help with the county fire unexpected expenses, but she's also said, buy something. So if you're interested, I would very much encourage you to go to her website. It's VRESEIS.com. And let me just read a little bit about the farm. Located in the Capay Valley of California, northeast of San Francisco, Viriditas Farm is the place where Fox Fiber naturally colored cottons are bred and grown. Certified organic by CCOF, about 140 merino sheep enrich the soil and produce the finest wool in the state. Heirloom Sonora wheat produces flavorful, low-yield grain while adding tons of root and straw per acre, beautifully building the soil with each crop year. And so she has, on her website, she has lots of photographs and a lot of information about her farm and sustainability. she sells very interesting things, and I actually need to buy some more cotton because I just used up the last of mine, the cotton yarn. She has everything from coned yarn to hand spinners, cotton, sliver, roving, lint. She has fabric, beautiful fabrics, merino roving, yarn. And one of the things that I want to buy from her is some wheat.
Oh.
Some flour. Yeah.
That would be interesting, yeah.
A 2-pound bag of Sonora heirloom wheat, stone ground whole. So yeah, I think I might buy some of that. Anyway, if you're interested in contributing to someone who was affected by one of the California fires, I would say take a look at her shop and do some shopping.
Yes, I will take a look. I just said I don't need any yarn, but I could probably use some wheat.
There you go, some flour. Yeah, you can.
Some flour,
you can
yeah.
buy some flour. And I know there's some people who sew, who listen to the show. She also has a donation button to donate to the breeding program, her breeding program of the colored cotton, which that whole story of hers is just, I find that really fascinating. And I love the look of her fabric. So there's a lot to look at on her site. Yeah.
I'll take a look.
And some really pretty pictures too.
Yeah. Okay. That's exciting. I mean, I'm not about the fire. That's very disappointing, but it's exciting about her website and the shop. And
the work that she's doing.
The work she's doing and the things that she's producing.
Yeah.
Very interesting, yeah. I'll check it out.
All right. So that's it for me for this episode.
That's it for me. I have about 20 more stitches, and
ooh, exciting!
I'll be done binding off.
You
on
could
this.
have a live bind off.
Yes, well, we could just keep waiting and let the. No, I'm kidding. I was hoping I'd have a live bind off.
You count them down. 10, 9.
No, I don't think people really want to hear that.
No, that doesn't make for good radio.
No, it doesn't. Yeah. Anyway, okay, we will talk in 2 weeks.
All right.
Alrighty.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much for listening. To subscribe to the podcast, visit 2usfiberadventures.com.
Join us on our adventures on Ravelry and Instagram. I am Better in Motion, and Kelly is 100 Projects.
Until next time, we're the 2Us
doing our part for World Fleece.